Hello, I'm Tim Kane, and I'm going to talk about something that may be considered uncomfortable and is rarely openly addressed: domestic violence and sexual assault of women with disabilities. These are disturbing issues, but for women with disabilities, they're even more devastating, and the statistics are shocking. These women are between 4 and 10 times as likely to become victims of these appalling crimes. It's estimated that over half of women with disabilities will experience physical, sexual, or emotional abuse at some point in their lives. It's critical that professionals in the criminal justice system understand the best methods to ensure that these victims receive equal justice. Like all citizens, they have the right to protection under the law, but just getting access to the criminal justice system can pose a barrier for a person with a disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act has brought some improvements in physical access to justice, but sadly, the toughest obstacles can be attitudes based on assumptions about people with disabilities. Cases of domestic violence and sexual assault present challenges for even the most seasoned criminal justice professional. Equally complicated is understanding the wide spectrum of disabilities and the challenges these victims face. This DVD was funded by a grant from the United States Department of Justice to increase understanding of the needs faced by women with disabilities who are at risk every day. We'll discover that the term disability covers a broad spectrum, including invisible disabilities such as mental illness, brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder. We'll also see how abuse of women with disabilities typically differs from other kinds of domestic violence. Finally, we'll gain insight into these women's daily risk of becoming victims of crime. Please join me in my effort to bring justice to all citizens of Virginia, including those with disabilities.
We think of home as a sanctuary from the stress of everyday life. But for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, home is no safe haven. For those with disabilities, whether they live in an institutional setting or with a family, behind the closed door of a home may be the atmosphere of fear and dread.
What we know for women with disabilities is that the rate of sexual and emotional abuse is higher than for that of women without disabilities. We also know for women with disabilities that the abuse lasts for a longer duration, that they are more often abused by healthcare workers and personal care attendants, and that they have fewer options for escaping the abuse.
The lifetime prevalence of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse of people with disabilities is 62%. In recent years, our lawmakers have made great strides in recognizing and protecting people from domestic violence. But reaching out for help is never easy, and for those with disabilities, there are great physical and psychological barriers to overcome. Loretta is partially sighted and, like many women with disabilities, depends on her husband to provide help every day.
I have a long history of abuse in my marriage. It started shortly after I had our first child, our son. His physical abuse would be striking me in my face, pushing, shoving, and the first time he did it, it was very frightening for me, and I didn't know how to handle it, so I never told anyone that I was being abused at home. I never shared that with anyone. I didn't know how to handle it, actually, so I just kept quiet.
There's a range of physical assaults, including slapping, kicking, throwing objects at somebody, and there are all types of sexual molestation that both groups experience. However, what we know from research, including the research I've done across Virginia, is that women with disabilities experience unique forms of abuse as well. Perpetrators often target the disabilities that the women have in order to demean, discredit, or devalue the women.
He used my disability, not being able to drive, and move around and get around on my own. There was a time, even after my son started driving, that he took all the keys to the vehicles, and my son nor I could move around. Well, sometimes my husband is not sensitive to my disability as far as moving furniture, having things placed in my pathway. I don't know if he intentionally puts them there to hurt me. I don't know if that's intentional, but he doesn't seem to care that they're there, and therefore maybe not care if I stumble over them or hurt myself because they're there.
Some disabilities can be hard to identify and often go undiagnosed. Many mental disabilities can themselves be the result of a lifetime of abuse.
Some of these women have experienced abuse from childhood on, and so they have post-traumatic stress disorder that's accumulated. And some of them haven't been in treatment to attend to that post-traumatic stress disorder or that depression.
Gail was raised in a family with a history of domestic violence, and at 16 married a man who became abusive. A lifetime of mistreatment left her with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
My disability, the main disability, which is the post-traumatic stress syndrome, is unseen unless something triggers a problem. And then it's very apparent. But for the most part, it's unseen. The most frightening thing for me regarding the disorder was loss of time. I went through days with loss of time. And that's scary when you have 2 children, because you're wondering, you know, was I hit in the head too many times? Did he do something to cause a brain injury? Did my father do something to cause a brain injury? Am I going crazy? I don't remember what happened yesterday. You know, did I take care of my kids yesterday? Well, they look fine, so I must have. And not being able to relay that particular symptom to someone without the fear of having your kids taken away.
Women with disabilities are also at increased risk of being abused because they are taught to comply with the demands and wishes of other people. This is called trained compliance. A woman learns early on that in order to get her needs met, she needs to do what others ask of her to do.
Fatalities and injuries are the worst-case scenario, but domestic violence does not have to be physical in nature to be a serious problem. The power and control wheel demonstrates the pattern of abusive behaviors used by a perpetrator to maintain power and control over a victim.
Some non-disabled men set out to choose women with disabilities for their partners because they perceive these women as being more needy, more dependent, and more easily controlled and manipulated.
Abusers want to control their victims, and they do not need to commit a crime to do so.
It might be very cruel to disable somebody's wheelchair, but that might not be a crime under our family violence statutes. It might be particularly loathsome to not give somebody a drink of water who's not able to get it themselves. But it might not be a crime under our family violence statutes.
My husband went so far as to monitor everywhere I went. He would watch the mileage on the gas, or the mileage on the car and the gas, look at grocery receipts, that type of thing. So he monitored every detail of my life and where I went, who I was around.
When we think of people with disabilities, we often conjure up stereotypical images. But the word disability covers a wide range of visible or hidden conditions which can strike at any point in life.
Some women are abused after they already have had a disability. This might be a disability with which they were born, or it might be a disability that they acquired, such as a spinal cord injury from a diving accident.
When Helen got married as a young, able-bodied woman, she had no idea that her dream of a happy marriage was about to be shattered.
The abuse started that night, my wedding night. I was married for 23 years. The kind of abuse that was going on was mortifying to me, and I couldn't tell anyone. I was humiliated. I got married in the 60s, and first of all, spousal abuse was not even a term then. I don't even think child abuse maybe was recognized at that point, and that was first. And then after spousal abuse and domestic violence was recognized, it was not believed to happen in affluent homes with educated people.
After putting up with years of violent abuse that left her in fear of her life, Helen finally decided to divorce her husband. But shortly after announcing her intention, an accident turned Helen's world upside down.
I was taking trash out of my house and evidently slipped on ice at the end of our driveway, went over backwards and hit the back of my head on the edge of a concrete curb. I don't remember any of this. And had a brain injury then, but like many women, didn't understand that I had a brain injury. I had told my husband maybe 2 weeks before that we were getting a divorce. He had made his second attempt on my life, and I decided that was it.
It's very hard to explain to somebody what it's like to walk out of your house in the morning carrying a big thing of trash, and by the time you have made it back into your house, you're disabled. I mean, it was an accident. It happened in a split second.
Helen now lives with traumatic brain injury. It has left her with cognitive problems, loss of memory, and executive functioning. Her husband lost no time in exploiting her new vulnerability.
My husband knew there was something wrong, and he never got me to a doctor. He never helped in any way. He just used that time to set things up the way he wanted them to be for himself. I actually had to take him to court to get my medication. While I needed a medication card to get it for insurance things. And while there, at some point he just crumpled up the card and just threw it at me. But this was not until we got to court.
Abusers often use the court system as a way to continue to abuse and harass women with disabilities. And so they might be trying to change court dates, prolonging court, getting continuances as a way to continue to harass and abuse women with disabilities. And I'd like for judges to try to be aware of when they think that might be happening in their courtroom.
Recently, Helen was involved in a serious car accident, leaving her with permanent injury to her legs and eyesight. While hospitalized, the legal harassment continued.
While trying to recover from this trauma, he constantly set court dates and all sorts of scary things for me, threatening to cut off my support. And of course, since I am not able to work, since I was a housewife and did volunteer work, I am not eligible for standard benefits. And so this entire time that I've been attempting to recover from this second accident, he has terrified me with litigation. It ended up costing me almost 2 years of my support to keep my support going. I don't know what I'm going to do about that.
It takes a lot of courage for a victim of violence to seek help. For someone with disabilities, there are even greater hurdles. They have to overcome the financial and physical challenges of accessing the legal system, and very often, the abuser is also their caregiver, raising a whole other set of problems.
When women with disabilities are partnered with or married to non-disabled men, many people think those men are just so wonderful because they're partnered with a woman with disability, they're taking care of her. And so when she does start to tell other people about abuse, other people tend not to believe her. Then the women are concerned that the person who provides at least some of their personal assistance services may be arrested. And then what are they going to do in order to get personal assistance services?
Distrust of law enforcement's capacity to remove the danger is another problem.
I had told him that I was going to leave. And that, of course, provoked a fight, an argument in itself, because how dare me think that I could do that. So that led to a tremendous fight that also led to being held in a bedroom at gunpoint. This is with 2 children in the house. And basically it went on like that for about 48 hours. He had knocked me out. He had threatened to shoot me if I leave the room. So the kids were pretty much on their own for 2 days. My brother came. Yeah, they knew that we were having trouble, my family did, and my brother came basically to check on me. And it was very simple. When he came to my back entrance door, I ran out the front door, grabbed the kids, and it was done. So from that point, I did call again, call the cops again. And for whatever reason, I didn't tell them about the gun. But just being so afraid of what he would do if he got out. And at that time, they seemed to always get out very quickly. You know, they'd get a bail bondsman and they were out.
Only a small minority of domestic abuse cases come before the courts, sometimes in the guise of divorce hearings. The whole process can be very difficult for those with disabilities.
It might take a while to establish a relationship so that they feel safe to be able to communicate their stories. And so sometimes the quickness of the court, the in and out of the court, women with disabilities feel overwhelmed and they don't feel like they're able to tell their stories fully within the court environment.
When I go to court, most judges know nothing about brain injury. I didn't before I had one. And because they don't see me function in my environment, they have no idea what my day is like or what planning and effort it takes for me to do even the most mundane thing.
Women who seem to be changing their stories often or who can't remember particular details of incidents that happen, they might have a traumatic brain injury. They might have a cognitive impairment. And then what the judge is seeing, what appears to be a woman who's just changing her story all the time, is really a manifestation of the disability, the head injury.
I can be easily made to look like a woman who's malingering. I can easily be made to look mentally unstable. It's not that hard to make me cry. It's not that hard to make me contradict myself so I can look like a liar.
A woman who has a particularly flat affect and she's recounting a story of horrific abuse, she may be experiencing severe depression or post-traumatic stress disorder, and that accounts for the flat affect.
I would not allow myself to tell anyone the whole story because I didn't trust anyone. Social services were people that took your children away. And that's where fear comes from. You know the situation that you have at home. You know what it's like, you're used to it. Yes, it's painful, but my children have a home, they have clothes, they have food, and they're in school. And at this point,